Hi, today we will learn about partial fractions of polynomials. What is a partial fraction? Partial fraction is a set of fractions that can be expressed as the sum of two or more separate proper fractions. And what is a proper fraction is whenever the degree of the numerator is less than the degree of the denominator. For example, like this. We see that the numerator, which is 3, has degree x power 0. And then the denominator has x power 1, which is degree 1. So this is what we call as a proper fraction, because the denominator has a higher degree than the numerator. An easier way to think about partial fractions is like it's a fraction which can be separated into two or more fractions. For example, like this. We have one fraction, but then we separate it into two fractions. And how to separate it? We can use this first formula when our denominator is consisted of linear factors. So just write each of the factor one by one, separate them with a sum or addition sign, and just write a constant a and b there. And why is it constant a and b? Remember, because it's a proper fraction. Proper fraction means that the degree of the numerator must be less than the degree of the denominator. Since our degree of the denominator is x power 1, which is linear, then our numerator must be of x power 0. And what is x power 0? X power 0 means that it's just a constant, because x power 0 is just 1. Let's look at how to solve this. Look at example 1. Express this polynomial, divide with the denominator in partial fractions. The first step when you want to solve this type of question is look at the denominator. See what type of denominator it is. Because in your syllabus, you will learn about 3 types of denominators. In this tutorial, you will learn about linear factors of denominator. In tutorial 6, you will learn about repeated linear factor. And in the 8th tutorial, you will learn about quadratic that cannot be factorized. When you have different types of denominators, your formula will be different. So now we will look at linear factors denominator. So that's why looking at the denominator is a very crucial step, because once you have written down the wrong formula, you will definitely get the wrong answer. Okay, so once we have looked at this question, we know that this is consisted of two linear factors and how to separate this into two fractions. Why do I know that for this question we only have two fractions? Because there's only two factors. And then start by writing down the linear factor one by one. So the first linear factor that I can see is x plus 1. The next one is 3x plus 2. Write it at the next fraction. Separate both of them with the plus sign in the middle. And then what should be on top of these fractions? Remember, the numerator must be 1 degree less than the denominator. So since our denominator is x power 1, so the numerator here must be x power 0, which is just a constant. Constant is just a. Okay? And the next one cannot be a because we have set a to be the numerator for the first fraction. So the other numerator, we can just let it as b. Next step, what we want to do here is we want to compare with the left-hand side fraction. And how to compare it with the left-hand side fraction? We need to have the denominators multiplied together. So what do we have to do is if we want to combine the numerators together, if we want to combine the denominators together, we have to multiply the numerators with the denominator of the other fraction. Like for example here, a is over x plus 1, so the other denominator is 3x plus 2. So just multiply with 3x plus 2 here. Or an easier way to look at this is when we want to find what is the factor that we want to multiply with a, we can just simply ignore the denominator of a and then look at the other denominator. So just multiply a with the other denominator. Same goes for b. We want to find what should we multiply with b, then we ignore the denominator of b and just multiply with b with the other denominator, which is x plus 1. Now, your denominator for the left hand side and right hand side is equal. So what can we do next is we can just compare the numerators and just ignoring the denominator part, like this. And then we should focus on finding the coefficient of a and b. We can just substitute any values for x. But what is the best choice? Of course, the best choice is to make one of this a or b 0. So to make it 0, for example, like here, you can simply see that the value of x that makes it 0 is negative 1. And how did you get negative 1? Is just by writing down the denominator factor, x plus 1, equated to 0, and then this is just negative 1. So then you can just simply add in the numbers negative 1, substitute it into your x. Like that. As you can see, negative 1 plus 1 is 0. So what's left is negative 3 plus 2. So this is just negative a, and on the left side, you can solve this, you get negative 5. So what's a? A is 5. It's that simple. Next, what's the best choice of your x? If you want to follow the same method, just now we have looked at one of the linear factor of the denominator, which is x plus 1. Now we should look at the other denominator, which is 3x plus 2. So we can just take that number, 3x plus 2, equate it to 0, and x is equal to negative 2 over 3. Now where should we substitute this value? Remember, we should always refer to this line. Okay, so you can write your titles there, like x equal to negative 1, which refers to this step, and then x equal to negative 2 over 3, which refers to this step. Okay, then substitute your values of x inside the highlighted yellow formula, and then just solve it. Make sure one of your constant term, a or b, will be 0. So once we have substituted in negative 2 over 3, we found out that this whole thing will be 0. So you're only left with b. If it's not 0, then there's something wrong with your choice of x. So you have to look at your denominator and equate it to 0 again. You just solve this, and your right hand side is just 1 over 3b, and your left hand side is negative 13 over 3. So what is b? You can just bring 3 to the left side, and the answer is just negative 13, and that's your b. Even though you have found your answers for a and b, but it's not enough because the question wants you to write in partial fractions. So a partial fraction means you have to write in the form of a plus b. So you have to refer to your first step, which is this. And then substitute your values of a and b to find your final answer. And this should be your final answer. Just replacing a on top of x plus 1 and replacing negative 13 on top of 3x plus 2. Remember, there's a negative sign there, so just bring it to the front. Remember, you can simply choose any values of x, but the best choice is the choice of from the linear factors of the denominator. You can try example 2 out, and I want to discuss example 3. Look at example 3. We want to express it in partial fractions. Remember, your first step is to identify what type of denominator this is. There are 3 types: linear factor, repeated linear factor, or quadratic that cannot be factorized. So which one is it? So this is consisted of only linear factors. So if it's only linear factors, that means we can separate into 3 fractions. Why 3 fractions? That's because we have 3 factors from the denominator. What should be the first factor? Just write down the first factor, x. Next factor is x plus 1. Write down x plus 1. The last one is 2x minus 1. So just write 2x minus 1. And what should be on top of them? Remember, the numerator must be 1 degree less than the denominator. And all of our denominators are linear, so our numerator must not be linear. It must be 1 degree less than linear, so it is just constant. So constant is just a, b, and c. Remember your second step. Second step is to equalize the denominator. Make sure the denominator from the left-hand side is equal to the denominator on the right-hand side so that we can just compare the numerators. Remember how to do it? Well, now we have more than 2 fractions, so it's a little bit harder, but it's not impossible. So a needs to be multiplied with 2 more factors. And what are those factors? Remember, you just have to ignore the factor under a and just look at the other 2 factors from the other 2 fractions and multiply a with the 2 of them. So just write it with next to a, like that. Now for b, we also do the same thing. Ignore the denominator for b and then just multiply b with the other 2 factors. Just write it beside b. And then for c, also do the same thing. Ignore the denominator for c and look at the other 2 denominators and multiply it with c. X times with x plus 1. Now, your denominators on the left and right hand side are equal. So what can you do next is you just have to compare the numerators. Just copy down your numerators from the left and right hand side and equate them together. Now, how to solve this? We have more than 1 factor. It's a little bit more complicated than example 1. But please do not expand these 2 factors. For easy calculation and also to reduce careless mistakes, just leave them as it is. And the next step is just to find what is the x value to substitute in. Remember what are the best values of x to substitute. Just look at your linear factors. The first linear factor that you can see here is x equal to 0. So that means we just have to substitute x equal to 0 here. Substitute all of your x with 0 and then simplify it. Why do we choose 0? Is because I know that by choosing 0, 2 of my constant terms will be equal to 0. Like this, 0 times b is just 0, so everything goes. C times 0 here is also equal to 0. So there's only 1 constant term left, so it's easy for me to find the value of a. Solve this. This is just negative a, and on the left side is 1. So what is a? A is negative 1. Remember, we still have 2 more constants to find out. We have to find constant b and also c. What will be the best next choice of x? Just look at the next linear factor. The next linear factor is x plus 1. Equate it to 0. X is equal to negative 1. So our next step is to substituting x equal to negative 1 into all of our x's. After we have substituted, remember 2 of the constant terms will be equal to 0. So here, negative 1 plus 1 is 0. Negative 1 plus 1 here is also 0. Okay, so you're only left with the b terms. Simplify that b term. I can see that it's actually 3b. And on the left hand side is negative 4. So what is b? b is negative 4 over 3. Next step, you can choose the other linear factor. and substitute that value. So the other linear factor is 2x minus 1 equal to 0, x is equal to 1 over 2. So our next step is to substitute 1 over 2 into the x. Remember, where did we have to look at to substitute the values? We have to look at the comparing numerator step here, highlighted in yellow. Always refer to that to substitute x. Okay, substitute 1 over 2, and then you can just simply find which constants that will be 0. So as you can see here, this is 2 divided with 2, so 1 minus 1 is 0, so the whole term is 0. 2 divided with 2 is 1, so 1 minus 1 is 0, so this also goes. The only thing left is just constant c. So just multiply that, 1 over 2 times 1 over 2 plus 1, it is just 3 over 4c. On the left hand side, solve it, you get 7 over 2, so c is equal to 14 over 3. Now you have obtained all of your constants value. A is equal to 1, b is equal to negative 2 over 3, and c is equal to 14 over 3. But remember, your final answer should be written in full, which is written in the formula or partial fraction, like this, highlighted in green. So you have to write final answer like that. Copy the same denominator. So under A is x, under B is x plus 1, under C is 2x minus 1. So I'm just going to write down the denominators first. And then I will add in my constants. So A is negative 1, I just write negative 1 on top of x. B is negative 4 over 3, but since this is a fraction, I'm going to write 3 below and put a bracket in front of the denominator. Next, C is 14 over 3. This is also a fraction, so I'm going to write 3 below. And that's your final answer. But also notice that there's a negative here. We can still simplify this further. So since negative times x is just negative, so we can simplify this to be negative times positive is negative, so just write negative in front. Also the same for negative 1. You can write negative 1 on top, or you can also write it in the middle in front.